Headway, your route to fellowship. In this short session, I'm going to talk you through the scheme itself and how it works. Then I'll focus in a bit on the portfolio that all applicants submit and what this might look like. And thirdly, I'll tell you what you need to do next if you decide Headway is for you. Headway is BPP's own accredited scheme which allows us to award both BPP and HEA Higher Education Academy fellowships to our teachers. Fellowship, much like a teaching qualification, is professional recognition of your ability and commitment to teaching as a profession. This diagram is a basic representation of the 4 different levels of fellowship, starting with associate and moving up to principal. We have much more comprehensive descriptors of each level of fellowship on our Headway intranet site, and these will help you to understand and identify which level you sit at in your current role. An application for fellowship made by an individual directly to the HEA would cost an average of £300. However, having our own accredited scheme means that you don't have to pay a single thing, and BPP will support you through the application process. For those of you that aren't familiar, the HEA, the Higher Education Academy, is the national body charged with enhancing learning and teaching in higher education in particular. We're moving away from a time where all university tutors would focus solely on their own academic research and scholarship, and towards an era where teaching is valued and is a respected skill. And the HEA is central to this, not just in the UK, but increasingly across the English-speaking world. There are currently more than 30,000 teaching academics recognised as HEA Fellows, and since we launched Headway in April 2013, we have already increased BPP's fellowship by 200%. In order to gain fellowship through Headway, you will need to submit a portfolio of evidence showing your engagement with learning and teaching in your current role, and to some extent in previous roles where appropriate. The portfolio will look different depending on upon which level of fellowship you're aiming for, and we'll look at one example shortly. The portfolio isn't entirely made up of primary evidence. For example, if you state that you have attended a certain training session, we don't ask you for a certificate or a statement to prove this. Some of the evidence is primary and relates to your practical classroom-based activities. We put a very strong emphasis on reflection in the portfolio, so you aren't only describing what you do, but also analysing and critiquing it and finding ways to enhance what you do. Your portfolio is also there to demonstrate your engagement with the theory and literature behind teaching and learning, and again, depending upon the level of fellowship, you will need to demonstrate this to varying degrees. Lastly, and very importantly, your portfolio needs to meet the UKPSF, the United Kingdom Professional Standards Framework. This is the framework, the dimensions of practice, and you should look at these as the criteria against which your portfolio will be judged. There are 15 elements here split across the areas: core knowledge, professional values, and areas of activity. This can look quite intimidating at first, but as you start to put your portfolio together, you'll soon realise that you meet the majority of these elements in your job, even when you aren't consciously aware of it. Again, this information is all available and broken down on the Headway intranet site. Now, we'll look briefly at a typical Associate Fellow portfolio and what this requires. There are 6 elements that make up this portfolio. The first is the recognition application cover sheet, which is where you state your intent to become a fellow and at which level. This is a very short document. The second is a teaching philosophy, where we ask you to articulate your approach to teaching, what good teaching means to you, what the role of a teacher is. Remember, there is guidance available for each element of the portfolio. Thirdly, we ask for an example of documented peer observation. This means a colleague coming to observe you or you observing a colleague, and your reflections on this process. The fourth piece is a documented example of in-class evaluation. This is where you ask for feedback from your students on your teaching. You want to get some qualitative comments that you can work with and use to enhance what you do in the classroom. Next comes an academic CV. This is you covering your experience and qualifications with a particular focus on your roles in education and training. And the last document is the written reflection. And this is where you make it clear to the panellists that you have met the UKPSF in your portfolio. You need to explain where in your portfolio they can see that you have addressed the criteria for fellowship. There is a lot of guidance available on the intranet, however, you will be by no means left alone to work on your application. My role as Headway Coordinator is to support you through the process and help you to prepare in the lead up to submission. Also, through my conversations with you, I'll be able to put you in touch with people across the institution that might have particular knowledge or expertise in an area that interests you. So in that way, Headway functions quite well as a networking tool. Each portfolio is judged at a panel. Starting in the new year, we will have a panel roughly once a month. However, a panel will only run if we have a minimum of 3 portfolios. Your portfolio must be submitted on the last day of the preceding month, as we need to give the panellists ample time to look at your evidence. The favoured presentation method is a written application. However, if you feel that your teaching context is somewhat unusual and would warrant further explanation, then you can choose to present in person. This gives the panellists the opportunity to ask you further questions and seek clarification. Panels are made up of BPP employees that already have fellowship of the HEA. Where possible, we try to select panellists from different areas of the business. There is also a chair and a secretary at each panel, and occasionally we'll have an external representative at a panel as a quality assurance measure. Normally, you'll be informed within 3 days of a panel as to whether you were successful. This will then be followed by some developmental feedback from the panellists, which will have been written up for you by the secretary. We do put an emphasis on the developmental nature of our scheme, and so even outstanding applications will have pointers and advice as to how they can enhance their practice even more. Some of you, when you hear the words higher education, might wonder how relevant this is to you in PQ. However, our scheme has been designed and developed with all BPP tutors in mind, so anybody in a teaching role at BPP can take advantage of fellowship and the support that engaging with Headway can offer you. Those of you that teach on university programmes like the ACCA full-time or the GDA would benefit strongly from engagement with Headway. More and more, if you start looking at job applications for colleges and universities, you will notice that HEA fellowship is a desirable and in some cases an essential requirement. And so we can be confident at BPP that we've implemented a worthwhile scheme. We've already had colleagues from PQ go through Headway at associate, fellow and senior level, and we really look forward to welcoming more of you. So what next? If Headway sounds like a scheme you would like to take advantage of, then email headway@bpp.com to find out more and start the application.